Hey everyone, and welcome to the Late Night Show. I'm Jimmy Fallon, and today I'm joined with my fellow classmates. If you'd please introduce yourself.
Okay, hello guys. I'm James and I am a scientist in violence.
Hello, my name is Robert, and I am a fellow scientist for the Black community.
And I'm Anton, and I'm just a wackadoodle guy who does political stuff.
And today's topic is violence and poverty, where our focus is guns.
Okay, so I will start. And according to Scientific American, there's a study showing that the poor actually have a greater risk of becoming more violent. A study shows that if you live in a poor neighborhood, there are actually an increased chance by 27% of higher rate of gun homicides.
So why is that, do you think?
Yeah, why does the study show like that?
The reason why is this: poor people often feel jealous on the wealthier people since they like all the new stuff like the new iPhones, Xbox, PlayStations, and they get angry and frustrated because they have nothing to do with being poor. That's actually the parents' fault. So since the kids don't have anything to do with this, they get really upset because this ain't their fault. So they take their aggressions out on other people, and this can eventually end up in gun violence
So,
and
what
overall
just
violence.
what you're saying is that the majority of gun violence in poor communities is committed by children.
For me to say that it was children was wrongfully said, I meant more like young people in the age of like typical from 15 to like 25. So yeah, I believe that most violence is committed by younger people and especially men
Yeah,
the
I
age
mean
from
women are like 5% or something.
yeah.
And backing that up, there's also statistics from the FBI, and while they are somewhat criticized sometimes, they are generally known as a good source because it's the fucking FBI. That shows that the most prevalent form of homicides is white on white, which makes sense since whites are by far the majority of the American population. And followed closely by that, there's black on black or African American on African American violence. And there's only 77 more, there were only 77 more white on white homicides than black on black. And then there are twice as many black on white as white on black homicides. So this really shows that for one reason or another, blacks commit more homicides per person, as they obviously make up a much smaller portion of the population. That probably has largely to do with the fact that black communities are often impoverished and don't have a lot of financial funds. And as you said, when people don't have a lot of money, and especially when there's a large income inequality, so some people are poor and some people are rich, the poor often commit quite a lot of violence.
so why do you think that the black people or the black community are just generally poorer and have a lower income than the whites?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. First off, there's a lot of poverty. I mean, we know that having rich parents on average makes you richer, and so it's only like a few generations back that you really saw racism against blacks, segregation and stuff. And so if your parents were poor, you were poor, and then your children are poor, and that's basically, I mean, the grandparents of most adult blacks today were discriminated against in the 50s, for example. And therefore, we can really see that it's probably just a thing that is a leftover from more racist times. And I also think it's partly a cultural thing because very often in black communities, the father leaves the home quite early, and homes with single mothers often do much worse in a lot of ways. One of them being income. That's something we also talked about in the psychology podcast, because it makes you a lot more susceptible to a lot of bad things like poverty and violence.
And especially black sons, when their father has left early, they get very confused and frustrated on why he left, and because they usually never get an explanation. and that, as you say, causes some problems, especially towards violence, because he has all that bottled up anger and built up frustration that he just wants to lead out, because normal people cannot handle that stuff. And as you said, people with income inequality tend to get more violent because they want to like secure their stuff more, because they get jealous of the wealthier people.
Yeah, and according to a website called Statistica, we see that there are actually a lot more Black families with single mothers than there used to be. It's increased from 3.4 million in 1990 to above 4 million in 2020, though it does seem like it's stagnated and isn't growing anymore. The peak was in 2010, following the financial crisis, funnily enough, which also implies that this has partly to do with economics.
But we all know that it's not only black people who are poor. There are also a lot of white people who are poor. So it's not only black people who are able to commit such crimes. But I also think that it has something to do with just generally their mental health. Not only that they're poor, although that when you're poor, of course, you said you get jealous of all the rich people because they have everything.
And I also think some of that is that we allow them to blame racism. So if a Black person does poorly, they can always say, oh, it's because the system is racist. And in that way, they feel like it's not their fault, and it gives them the right to attack the system, or a justification for that. And so I think that makes them more likely to attack the system, because they often feel like the system or society is attacking them through racism.
But you said it doesn't have so much to do with racism today. You said it was a leftover from previous times.
Exactly. I don't think there's actually a lot of systemic racism against blacks. There might be some. There's also some against Asians and whites. But I think it's more that they often get told, oh, it's because the world is racist. You didn't get to college because you think everyone else is racist. And so they blame society and they blame everyone but themselves for their mistakes. And that leads to them hating the system and hating society and lashing out instead of trying to improve themselves.
Yeah, and what you said earlier about like black kids, especially black kids, getting all that frustration, the parents were doing bad and their grandparents were doing bad, both socially and like in the economic wise, is just how social heritage works really, and that's really nothing that you can break the barrier and break the barrier and have a better social status, but it's hard because, as you said, say the system is rigged and they are racist and everything. That's just like basically not their fault. Just like the system most likely is leading towards the white population, like as like it has like mostly I'd say it's like hard to determine what's real and what's false.
Yeah, I mean, the government, the American government is trying to help blacks. Like some educations, you have to have lower grades if you're black, because they want a certain part of the population to be black. And so, for example, educations with mathematics are hugely overrepresented by Asians and partly by whites. And so your grades have to be higher, your GPA has to be higher if you want that education when you're white or Asian. And they do that
the demands for white people is higher because
more white people do good.
Yeah, for white people, because it's a known fact that black people tend to do worse in almost everything. Yeah. And almost everything in the community.
And I think that creates a lot of the social split there is in America, because now the whites also feel discriminated against like the blacks do.
And the reason why the black people are like worse basically everything, is because of the social rank compared to the white people.
Yeah, obviously, and that's what I talked about. This social heritage and them basically being worse off because their parents were. But I don't think we can do much about that except give it time and give them plenty of opportunities to get jobs and education and so on.
Agreed.
And I think that wraps it up for tonight. This has been Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show, and good night. and today I'm joined with my fellow classmates. If you'd please introduce yourself. Sig noget.
I am a scientist in violence.
Yes, of course.
Violence,
Iron Man.
especially in black communities.
Ikke snak engelsk.
By 27%, according to... Det skal jeg lige finde, fordi jeg kan ikke sige Wikipedia. If you're earning less than $24,000 a year, you will be poor. So
Hey drenge, hvor langt er I nået i jeres podcast?
I er lige i gang med at optage,
Hvor lang
faktisk.
tid tror I kommer til at have?
ja, så hold lige kæft, William.
Vi skal have 10 minutter,
Hvad?
William, og vi er i gang med at optage.
I gang med at optage. But,
I mean you.
well, no,
Lige ved igen. Og bare tale på dig.
butter. And I think that wraps it up for tonight. This has been Jimmy Ballas on The Tonight Show, and good night. Siemens støvsuger.